And welcome to the Digital Digest, your weekly breakfast of insights, tips and tricks, and general information that will help anyone trying to move things forward in this digital world of accounting. This show is sponsored by Genesis, who are probably one of the leading AI powered OCR tools nowadays. It's also brought to you by Digital Disruptors, who are pushing the boundaries in this digital accounting space. I'm your host, Ryan Piercy, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by John again. He's back from his world trip, talking to, I guess, innovators in the accounting space around the southern and northern hemispheres, and back from the Finance Takes the Piece. John, so have you learned a lot from your trip?
Um, yeah, from my trips, yeah, I've worked quite a lot actually, Brian. It's been really enjoyable. It's been nice to spend time with friends in the industry. I think that's really important for me. And yeah, there's always really interesting things to take away from these, from the way that people run their practices or the way that they're thinking about investing or developing their practices over time. And quite often it's the human elements that really make a difference in terms of maybe giving back decision making to teams, helping them to sort of figure out the way that they want to grow and develop their own areas of specialism or their own pods and things like that to give them some agency over what they do. So I find that really, really fascinating. And in the context of what we're going to be talking about, of course, that's going to be really interesting, this kind of human versus AI conflict that we might be coming up against in 2025.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is the focus of this week's show. We're going to talk a lot about agentic AI. And from what I understand, that topic came up whilst you're at Finance Takes the Piece. So I'm sure you've got some great insights to bring in. But before we dive into agentic AI, let's do a very quick history of how, I guess, the AI has evolved or boomed over the last few years. And I think the big trigger point was the launch of ChatGPT um, in November 22, I think. So just
Yep.
over 2 years ago, which is crazy to think it was that recent with everything that's happened since then. Um, and then I think there was lots of development across lots of different AIs, lots of new ones coming up. And in the accounting industry, we saw the launch of Just Ask Zero last year, Intuit Assist, and Sage's Copilot. And then the start of this year went pretty much nuts with the UK promising investment, I think up to 14 billion and 14,000 jobs in this space across the next few years. And then because that was such a tiny figure, 14 billion. Trump straight away came in January announcing 500 billion will probably be invested over in the US into Project Stargate, and had some big players like Sam Altman as part of that announcement. But to top all that, in the last few days, we've had the Chinese AI tool DeepSeek just kind of blow the market away with the fact that they have supposedly developed this DeepSeek version 3 for $6 million, which is like a tiny, tiny fraction of all of the other investment that's gone into AI. And its rivals, if is not more powerful than ChatGPT. Now, I know that I think it was yesterday there was some announcements by Microsoft, who own ChatGPT, and that they think there may be some not stealing, but use of their technology. So I'm sure this is going to be contentious, but that's already pushing the boundaries. If we can develop AI models for as little as 6 million, that surpass what's been there before, this is
Yeah.
a really exciting space. And I think 2020.
You
Well, I think
you
we
and I are going to be
predicted
doing it
it. To be
next,
honest.
aren't we? 6 million
Yeah,
is
yeah. I mean, I'm sure.
pocket
I'm
change.
sure. Just with the Lego that's behind me, I'm gonna build an AI model. But I think the critical thing is that we predicted there would be a leap forward in 2025 on AI. We didn't think we'd see any tangible impact to the UK until probably 2026 from a accounting perspective. But maybe this has already changed that, and we're only in January. So look, agentic AI is our focus. So John, why don't you talk us a little bit about what agentic AI is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess just to sort of differentiate between what we've kind of seen with the likes of ChatGPT and obviously, as you mentioned, DeepSeek, which did come up in conversation last week when I was on the slopes, is that at the moment with all of these large language models, they still require an input. They require us to put a query into them and get an output. The difference now with agentic AI is that effectively, I guess it almost combines a little bit of what you would get with RPA in terms of you're teaching it to do something, and then you let it run autonomously. And I think that's the key thing: is you allow it to do a set of tasks autonomously, and it can also make decisions based on the context and the inputs that it's receiving. Um, and that essentially mimics a human being. It's a way that we go about decision making. It's a way that we go about completing tasks. And I think that's the thing that's probably really interesting and also potentially really challenging for us in this space, because we've talked probably over the last I don't know 18 months or so about talking about the accountants that embrace AI and large language models are going to be the accountants that survive versus the ones that don't. I've always thought that was platitudes, that we were just trying to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we're going to be replaced by robots. And I'm even more convinced now, having seen some of the developments that we're seeing right now, is that I think there's almost an inevitability about some of these things in terms of some of the tasks that we're going to be able to complete. And the way that it works essentially is that you give you build a model, you build an agent, and it learns based on using things like machine learning and algorithms to process the data that you might be putting into it or sending to it. It can then obviously then make decision making, and again, like a human, that decision making is not always going to be flawless. It's going to be going to make mistakes, but you can teach it, and over time, obviously, as you build up that momentum, build up that data, and build up that repetitiveness of doing that, it will learn more and more to be more accurate and more effective. And then, as I said, it's adaptable, so you can change some of the inputs, and you can also ask it to change some of the outputs, and get slightly different results as a consequence. And you can then see, I guess, that this could bring massive productivity enhancements to an organization. You could change completely how you're then going to sort of think about doing tasks and things like that. And just to show that it's really topical, even the ICAW had a little paper on this yesterday, which was written by Dudley Gold from Circuit, talking about how he built his first AI agent. Just been playing around and using it to take the trial balance data that you get from a set of accounts from a bookkeeping software, and then using it to map so that you could use it for either work papers or for audit purposes and those kind of things, which is not an untypical problem that we come up against. This is quite a common thing that we would find. Often nowadays, I guess you would do it in a work paper solution or even in the audit in an audit pack, but still we find that there are organizations and accounting firms that are doing this either in Excel or some other way to kind of get data out of one accounting system and maybe into an accounts production software, for example. And he's managed to build it, and it runs, and it's incredibly automated, and and that's just the consequences, I guess, of where we've come to now.
Yeah, and I think building on what you were saying, the other bit that was announced, I think the back end of 2024 might have been January. January's been so crazy for AI, it may have been then. But the fact that you can now schedule these, so you can you can build your model and then ask it to run it on a repetitive schedule. So say you're doing a period end, you could ask or train your model to look at prepayments, accruals, check your controlled accounts, everything that we do for management accounts as an accountant. You could essentially train an AI model to do this, and that's what's so exciting / terrifying about the agents, which is agentic AI. Now, just for clarification here, because you said about RPA. Now, RPA essentially can go across multiple platforms. You might work in multiple programs. It could be logging and doing those things. Is that essentially what we're saying for agentic AI? Is that instead of where we've had the models that were released last year, say Just Ask Zero, Intuit, Assist, etc., where you're kind of just working in the restrictive platform it's in, these models can go across a broader range as long as you've enabled them access to the programs. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I guess what we're seeing with the likes of Jax and some of the other things that are sitting in the ledgers is they're effectively a closed system where you interrogate just that system, and they are they are using a large language model and repeating, I guess, what we've seen with things like Digits in the US, where basically you're having a conversation with your data. So you're saying, what was my marketing spend last month? What's my profitability look like, or my profitability trend look like? And it's going to return results from that. When I mentioned RPA, the thing about RPA is that for a long time that was kind of looked at being the thing that would close the gap between SaaS products and desktop products and improve automation. But again, quite often it's single track. So it's like the chatbots of old. You know, when you would go into a customer service chatbot and it would say, you know, what are you here for? And it would present sort of three or four options, and then there'd be another. And if you went down the other route and then asked a really difficult question, it would basically say, computer says no, and I'll send you off to a human being. Whereas with large language model and enabled chatbots, because it's using that natural language processing and being able to understand the context of what you're asking, it can navigate through that and try not to return you back to a human being or give you that computer says no thing. And that's the, I guess that's the difference between RPA and what we're starting to see with agents now, is that RPA will only work if you set up the tasks and the series of tasks properly. So if you're familiar with using Zapier or Power Automate or some of the other, you know, some of the more sophisticated tools in the market, then you have to go in and you have to say, right, do this step first, then do this step, then do this step, then return this, and then maybe analyze that, and if it's a 1, do this, if it's a 10, do X. But you have to figure out all those pathways and teach it those things. The difference with an AI agent is that you can almost, in some respects, say, either based on an input, you might have 5 or 6 different outputs, but it'll figure those out. Or you could even say in that case of Dudley's, you can even say, look, go and find the nominal ledger data from Xero, or go and find the trial balance in QuickBooks, or go for this client, or go and find. And you don't have to teach it how to log in. You don't have to teach it how to find those things. It can figure it out itself. Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, has basically said that he thinks that AI agents will completely transform the way that sort of SaaS products as we know it and the SaaS space works. And so I think, if a man who knows way more about these things than I do is saying that kind of thing, we definitely got to sit up and listen. And that's what's really, really fascinating. And I think this fact that once you built these things and they start to learn and train, is that they will start to do more and more automatically. And this isn't new. I mean, like, to be fair to ChatGPT, they launched this, I think it was towards the back end of last year, just before I went away. For $200 a month, you could get effectively you could pay for a bot that would start to complete tasks for you. It's just that all of a sudden we've just suddenly seen this boom of people being able to do more. And the irony is, you don't really need that much in terms of skills to be able to do this, because you can go to a ChatGPT or a DeepSeek, if you prefer, or whatever it is, and go, how do I build an agent? And it'll suggest the products that you should use. It'll suggest how to do the coding. It'll even teach you how to do all of the things. And so the sort of the boundaries or the limitations to enter into this sort of space are really, really low at the moment.
Definitely. I mean, it is crazy, and what can be done, and what will, I guess, come as well. And I think that's something we should probably touch on now is, with everything that's happened, what do we think the key focus, the key developments are going to be across 2025? Not necessarily for the accounting sector, but just for AI in general. I mean, I think it's going to become a lot more contentious, especially between the US and China, and who owns the rights to this, because it's really hard to determine where an AI agent has kind of been developed for, because it learns and evolves. So I think that's an area. But we've also seen some issues regarding data security. So if you haven't seen this, there was a breach from Sage's Copilot, where it shared data that was related to a different entity when it was asked a question. And that's a closed system. So one that we, I guess, would be feeling as more trustworthy, we're more comfortable with. And we've already seen some breaches. Now, they said it's not a huge risk. It was not a huge breach for them because it was nothing that was GDPR related, but it's still sensitive data. And I think that's what's critical. Whenever it's financial, we're talking about sensitive data. So I think security is going to be a big focus as well in 2025. And it's that balance between pushing the boundaries and maintaining data security. And I think we're really going to see a fight between those two areas. But what do you think, John, will be some of the big developments? I assume there's going to be a huge focus on agents.
Yeah, I think almost inevitably there's going to be a huge focus on agents, because these are the ways that you can start to make practical, relatively simple use cases and implementations of this latest sort of phase of the AI journey. And what are most businesses and what are most accounting practices looking for? More and more efficiency. We're looking to drive down the cost of operations. We're looking to drive down the cost of delivery. And so, in the same way that in the past we jumped on SaaS products like Xero and QuickBooks because it started to make the bookkeeping quicker and easier when you connected it into an OCR product and did all of these other whizzy things that we've been talking about for 15 years. That improved the way that we could deliver a service, or that improved the way that a business could perform their operations. This is going to be the next big thing. I think what's going to be slightly more fascinating about this, though, is that I think it's probably going to be more individual organization led, rather than we're not going to be going to vendors and vendors are going to be saying, and this is, and I'm going to be honest here, I'm completely changing my position on this. So like last year, I talked about the fact that the AI journey was going to be vendor led, and that people were going to start buying products from the likes of Sage, from the likes of Silverfin, from wherever else, that were going to help with their automation journey. I actually don't think that's going to be the case anymore. Having explored how easy it is to make some of these agent models and stuff, how relatively simple it is to implement and get up to speed with this, I think what we're going to start to see is we're going to start to see lots of organizations building their own models, probably replicating what other organizations are doing. So I might almost do exactly what Dudley's already done in terms of like that mapping bot, and then launch it within the organization. And so I think we're going to end up with this really interesting position, is that in some respects, this is going to kind of democratize the ability to utilize AI within organizations, but it's also going to create within it its own inefficiency, because if I'm creating a bot that does something and Dudley's created a bot that does something, you create the bot that does exactly the same thing, who knows who's got the best one and built it most effectively. And the irony, with AI is that it works better at scale with more data, with more processing time and everything else, because it learns, it learns what it's doing wrong and what it's doing right, and everything else. But isn't that just like being a human being? Because there's lots of us doing the same things in different ways, all slightly inefficient or slightly flawed. And so I think that's quite fascinating in itself. I think the other thing that we will start to see more of as well is that we will just start to see more people sort of like just developing in their sort of the bedroom or the corner of the office and stuff, just as they come up against problems. In the same way that we know that in organizations, whenever you hit a problem, in the past you would maybe write an Excel macro to automate something, or you might have used Zapier or Power Automate. This is kind of going to be the next thing. This is going to be the next thing that we start to adopt and utilize and things like that. So that's going to be where we're going, I think. I don't know how it's always difficult to kind of estimate or gauge what the adoption curve is going to be like, because we kind of again, we made the mistake 15 years ago talking about cloud and how it's going to obliterate the accounting sector or change the accounting sector, and lo and behold, we're still here. And I had a conversation on Monday with a business that is still using desktop accounting software and only now looking to change, and it would transform their business. So it is quite challenging to figure that out, but I do feel it's going to be transformative, and I do feel as we go through the year, we're going to start to see more and more use cases of people having built things, demonstrated them, and potentially making them open and available for people to utilize. And that's going to be the interesting challenge for all of these people that provide the underpinning models, is like, how do they monetize this? How do they make sure that that's in control? Because like I say, I do think that this is going to distribute out a level of control away from sort of like the vendors in our market, and not just the accounting software vendors, but the general vendors in our market.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest in that, but I think to summarize it, I think there's going to be inflection points where there's a dramatic change, and it's going to revolve around a few factors. So we've had one where ChatGPT was launched, and then everyone went nuts. What's possible is crazy. Now we're getting one around agents and agentic AI and the breadth. And we predicted that last year, that is the next way. When you've got a model that can work across multiple platforms, you can train it. So we predicted that would happen, and we're seeing that in 2025. I think that's going to be the big focus. And as you say, I think where it properly starts to get adoption is where we see the tangible examples, and it opens people's minds up to what's possible. So I think those huge shows such as Digital Accountancy Show, where you've got specific talks demonstrating how to use it and how to bring it into your firm, is going to be a critical point for accountants around the UK understanding what they can do. But we've talked about the fact that you're just going to start replicating everything else that people have done. And I think another inflection point is going to be the first marketplace, the first place where you can start listing what your AI tools can do and sell them, and people can review them, rate them, and validate them to some extent. And when that starts happening, then that's going to just boom, because you don't have to build it. You can go and buy it. Someone's building it and creating a market for that. So as soon as we've got a marketplace of AI agents, there's going to be another steep like curve upwards. And that point, I think we're going to start to see issues with jobs, because you can essentially replace people by buying something off a shelf.
Yeah, to a degree, you've almost got that a little bit. Certainly, if you're a ChatGPT user, if you've played around with making your own GPTs, you can publish them and make them available to the public, or you can keep them private within either your own your organizational domain or within your own your subscription domain and stuff like that. But there's absolutely, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no reason why people couldn't monetize this. And again, I think the really big shift here with this is that, yes, we've had all of the excitement of ChatGPT and Claude and all of these other models and stuff, and yet certainly in the accounting space and in quite a lot of the other business space is that people still haven't really found a killer use case. Yes, it's nice to do your LinkedIn posts or your marketing, or you can do little bits of coding here and there, and you can shortcut various things. But people have still struggled to say, right, okay, if I bring this thing into my organization, what can I do with it, and where do I genuinely save time, or what process or system is it going to replace? And the reality is that quite often it's quite difficult to find a killer use case. Again, with agentic AI or with this, we're literally talking about something that will run a process for you and automate it. And yes, we've had this before with RPA and other things like that. And like I say, we've played around with that. But this is a big shift in a direction of taking that automation, making it smarter, and quite literally being able to replace something. And okay, let's temper that enthusiasm a little bit by saying in the early days you're still going to need some human interaction and some human monitoring of those things, because it's going to be needing to learn and train. But even that's going to be relatively limited over a period of time. And so where the human intervention is maybe going to come in, and I'll come back to the point that you made about sort of security and managing the data, is maybe that's the real thing that we, as the people building these models or interacting with these models, really need to understand and appraise, is that where's the data going? How secure is the data? What's happening with the data? Is it going to be potentially exposed to other people, or even at risk of being shared with the wrong people? And Sage might have gotten away with it by saying, "Oh, it wasn't a GDPR breach," but I tell you what, I'd be really pissed off if it was my invoices going to another customer or another business that was a competitor of mine. So I think that's a bit of a cop out, to be fair, from them. And so these are the things that we now need to learn and understand. So yes, we can, in the same way that we rushed headlong into ChatGPT and started sharing private information with these models, and then suddenly found out that it was being used to train stuff and being turned out in results, we need to also understand that this is a risk that we need to manage, particularly in the accounting space and other professional spaces when you're dealing with potentially confidential information. But again, that's easily managed. It's easily researched. It's easily understood. It's just a matter of setting aside that time to do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about some tangible cases where we think this is going to have an impact, especially on the accounting sector. So definitely in 2025, we're going to see a change in how the OCR models work. They're going to leap forward. We've had Genesis, we've got Briefcase, and even Dexter rebuilding their model to kind of work with an AI powered rather than the automation bot of looking at what we've done previously and how do we replicate that. That's a given. It's happening. That will be a big thing in 2025. But I think period end will be something that will become a big focus, because especially with agents, because that's been an area that's been really challenging to streamline. You've had a few tech products trying to do this, but most of them are steer clear because it is so nuanced, and it's really hard to replicate the experience that you get as an accountant. But if you can build that experience, that thought process into an agent, then essentially we can start to streamline that process. And now, if you're doing that, your entire year end for accounts is changing. You've got management accounts changing, and we are moving towards more the advisory away from the compliance, the mechanics. And it brings challenges in for educating and training staff. And let's not even go there because I have no idea how to resolve any of it. But the other bit that we've seen, we knew was happening and is going to become a lot bigger, is that tax return process. We've had it over in the US with their product, which I've forgotten the name of right now, but that's something we're starting to see in some UK products where it takes the information that someone throws into a program, it ingests that, it extracts the relevant information, drafts the tax return, and it creates like a risk assessment and pushes it back, going, "Have you considered this? Do you want these deductions based on the information you presented?" That's something that will be attacked as part of this. So there's a few key areas that we'll see. But apart from those three, do you think there's any other specific focal points, John, that we would see AI agents tackling?
I mean, I mean, I think to be perfectly honest, there's pretty much any task in an accounting practice that's up for grabs. But I mean, you're absolutely right, Ryan. We're already seeing it in the kind of like that OCR space, and I think that month end one that you mentioned is a really critical one. I mean, we know from sort of rumors and murmurings from vendors that that's prepayments and accruals out of the back end of doing the OCR or the extraction of data is something that they're all focusing on. I guess the challenge has been historically is getting either that line item information or verifying that the information extracted has been accurate so that you could then do those calculations. Again, an AI agent could start to learn that and start to build that out really quickly. And actually, that's something that we're exploring and looking at doing. The tax return thing, again, we've known about that for a while. We've seen that other people have done that, and they've done that without agentic AI. They've done that utilizing fairly boring normal chatbots and RPA in the background to kind of hook into other systems and stuff. So again, we're looking at something that something that was quite complex to build out historically is now going to be relatively simple to build. And I think this is the thing, is like, this isn't going to be the preserve of the large firms that can invest a lot of time and effort into these things. You're suddenly going to find that a relatively small firm, maybe with half a day or a day's worth of time, research and training can build something that will start to do this for you. One of the things that we've built, which isn't quite on the agent level yet, but it's going to be shifting there, is that we've built something that helps with picking up what payments on account and stuff are due for tax return season. Obviously, we're a day out now from the deadline. Something that will log into all of our agent IDs, identify all of our clients that have got payments to make, and then we'll automate the provision of that information to them via email or by other messaging services. Just as a reminder, with all of the other information that we've got, and again, we can automate that and we can make it more into something that's more interactive and things like that. There's so many things. There's so many things in our world where we do a lot of data processing still, or handing off between systems. And I think anything like that that's up for grabs, and particularly where you and I, where I operate still, and we're used to operate in that mid tier at least, is like we still have this hybrid of on-prem and SaaS products as well, and that's always a challenge to kind of move between those. And again, this is where sort of agentic AI can really help to close the gap. And we kind of said that about RPA a few years ago, and it was always a bit more challenging to build. But again, like I say, this is easier to build, it's easier to do, it's easier to research. It's really just a matter of setting aside the time to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff. There's so many things that you could go at. It's really just a matter of like, what process do you want to nail down? What I think would be really interesting to see was that we talked about OCR. I mean, for me, OCR is a process that's quite streamlined already. Shifting from OCR to maybe an AI-led process, or a more sort of language-led process.
Yeah.
You're talking about relatively minor, small changes there in terms of like doing that extraction and posting into a system. If you can do prepayments and accruals on top, that's a transformational shift, and that's really interesting. So what I think people will focus in on is probably just go back and look at their processes and systems, and this is where it's really important to have those documented, and then figure out where they're losing time and what could they do there in terms of what are people still doing manually that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing that I know that is an area of AI focus at the moment is the ability to migrate information from one system to another, to bring it all across. Because it always used to be, if I have to change system, it's a horrible, painful event. I lose all the history of what I've been doing, or I have to pay an awful lot of money to move that. If we can use AI agents to move that data across, it also makes it a lot easier for people to pivot and pick new systems and evolve as they go. So look, we should always focus on what are the tangible things that people should be focusing on. Firstly, if you want to be working, I guess, or enable the use of AI agents, it is far easier if you're working in the cloud. If you brought like or moved your systems into the cloud, it's far easier for AI agents to work across that. So that's number one step. Two, educate yourself. Find tangible examples. Make sure you're clued up. Go to the likes of Digital Accountancy Show. Make sure you go to those AI talks, especially the ones that give you tangible examples that make you feel like, actually, I can bring this in. Keep up to date, follow the likes of us. You've got Billy as well at 2020, who talks a lot about AI. So please make sure you keep abreast with everything that she is talking about. And essentially, I would start having at least one member of your team properly investigating this. It's worth the investment, because you don't want to get left behind. If you've got a competitor that is doing this, fully adopts it, and you're scratch trying to get to where they are, is going to take you a lot longer. So look, those are the key focal points. We could talk about this for hours, but we just don't have that time. So given where we are, I feel this is a great place to wrap up this week's show. Hopefully this episode has brought you valuable insights about agentic AI, about where we are, about what's possible and what you should be doing. Please do check out the show notes for links to Digital Disruptors and a wonderful sponsor, Genesys. Plus anything and anyone that we probably reference, which is a lot. If you want to ensure you catch future episodes, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you look out for the release every Thursday morning, the live show that we now do at 9 a.m. We look forward to speaking to you again next week on a different topic.
Super.
Nice one, mate.
Excellent.